And welcome to Know Your Candidate, as Alabama will elect a new senator in December, replacing Jeff Sessions, who is now Attorney General of the United States. Judge Roy Moore, twice the Chief Justice here in Alabama, joins us now. Judge, thank you very much.
Thank you, Lance.
It is a pleasure to meet you. We appreciate you taking time out. Now, there is a big crowd in this campaign. What differentiates you, and how are you better for Alabama than the other candidates?
Well, I think my experience and what I've done, my knowledge of the judicial branch. I've been in law for many, many years, and I know there's a big problem with federal courts and the Trump administration. I think I can take something to Washington to help them, but an understanding of the Constitution and my military background. I'm a graduate of West Point, and I served in Vietnam as a company commander of a military police company.
If you were elected, what would be your first priority in Washington?
First priority is get the office set up and ready to go, and then find out what they're doing on the different issues. For example, I don't know if the health care debate will still be there or not. If it were, I would vote straight repeal. I think that we need to repeal that. I don't think that government needs to be in the health care business. They've already messed up the Veterans Administration, as you well know, and that's what they would do. Basically, we have to open up state lines for a free enterprise system of health care.
Now, depending on which poll you look at, Congress has an approval rating somewhere between 50 and 20%. What needs to change to get the people of America actually happier with their elected officials and getting things done?
In November of 16, I think the people voted for a new direction in our country. And that takes legislation, it takes action in Congress. Right now, there's a deadlock. I mean, it's actually going nowhere. It's stalemated, partly because of the rules of the Senate, which I think violate the United States Constitution. A 60-vote rule to get a bill to the floor in the Senate is actually a supermajority, which under the Constitution is not included. It's a simple majority, and they're saying it's about filibuster. It's not about filibuster. It's a way to hide and not vote on legislation, in my opinion.
What about compromise? Can you work with the other side of the aisle? And in fact, can Republicans work with Republicans? There seems to be an issue in both that, and so you would be willing to do that?
Sure, I would work with anybody up there, but I do not compromise principle. And that's the thing you don't compromise on. When the federal government has no business in health care, when it has no business in education, when it's not under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, it's simple. You don't get into that, because if you do, there are serious consequences.
Where are some areas you think there is room for compromise with the other side?
Well, I think you can compromise on things like the extent of going into a country or doing what you're doing, how far you go in certain legislation. There's always areas that you can give and take, but as long as you do not compromise principle. And that's something you can't compromise. If you're not supposed to be in that field, then you don't compromise. You don't go into that. Our forefathers knew very well that you didn't do that. Washington said the president must always greatly overbalance in permanent evil any partial or transient benefit which the use could any time yield, talking about separation of powers. Powers are separated. It's not the Supreme Court's job to make law. And so you can't compromise with that. If they make law, then they should be impeached.
Well, health care, we've touched on that. Another big subject is tax reform.
Oh, I think.
What's your position on tax reform, and what do you think can be done?
I think we've needed tax reform for many years. Many people have offered a flat tax, for example. I think the best option that I've seen is the fair tax, because it doesn't tax your income. It taxes what you consume. People in America are known to spend their money. They're going to spend their money no matter what. You add the tax on the consumption, it's a consumption tax and not an income tax. Therefore, people keep all their money. You could do away with IRS. The businesses would actually collect the money and be rewarded for doing so. They could be.
All right, another subject touching on here is education. You mentioned that should go back to the states, and so that you feel strongly on that. The United States is maybe 20th is what they talk about in the nation, behind Estonia. What needs to be done?
It goes back to the free enterprise system as well. First, it's not in the Constitution. There is no role for federal government to be involved in our education system. If it becomes involved, it's like a monopoly. And then you don't have competition between the states. You don't have, you know, it's rather insulting to the people of Alabama and the people of Mississippi, Texas, whatever state you're in, to say they can't educate their children, and it takes some group in Washington to tell them what to tell their children. Common Core, in my opinion, should be abolished. It should be abolished in Alabama.
Infrastructure. What's your take on building a wall? Do you believe that that's something that needs to be done on the southern border? I
think we must stop illegal immigration. It's a threat to our security. It is, in fact, quote, illegal, unquote. It's something that we could allow the states like Arizona to defend their borders, which the Supreme Court stopped, saying that they had no business there. They actually do have business there, and they actually have a sovereign right on migration in the Constitution. I think that we could let the U.S. military get involved. I mean, if the United States military can't protect the border from incoming people, who can? I mean, if it takes a wall, I would build a wall. But we've got to address the immigration policy.
All right. Judge Roy Moore, we appreciate your time. Thanks for coming by, and good luck to you.
Well, thank you. And by the way, on infrastructure, I just got off I-10. And I know your problem, and I really believe that something needs to be done about that. That's a serious problem.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. Let's go back to you. That's works.